千机散，锋芒辉煌，一如既往远方。
The first step in rewiring is choosing a blade. You want to make sure to choose a blade that has a long lifespan, which means choosing one that is curved in the right way with a bend in the middle of the blade. Don't rewire weapons that are bent the wrong way, bent near the tip, or have an S-curve, as those are likely to break quickly. For your parts, you will need a grip, insulation and tip and nut, a socket, bell guard pad, and a bell guard. These cannot be found in your little Epee bundles. Next step, wires. When doing rewires, we have found that using the blue German wires seem to work best. Test to make sure that the wire is working properly. Burn the end so that you can expose the wires, and use an ohm meter to make sure that both wires are working. Epee has 2 wires, which means that both contacts at the end have to be tested. Clamp your Epee down using the vise. You're now ready to start rewires. We want to first make sure that the wire in the barrel fits the blade. Thread the wire through the barrel and then loosely screw the barrel onto the blade. While tightening the barrel, keep moving the wire to ensure that there's enough space for it without being pinched. A pinched wire is a broken wire. Once you are satisfied, use some thread locker and apply just a little bit on the opposite side of the blade from the wire. This will help make sure that the barrel stays tight and doesn't loosen as easily. Use a towel or a Q-tip if necessary to clean up any excess. Screw the barrel onto the blade, making sure that the wires are loose the entire time. Use a monkey wrench to tighten the barrel, but careful you don't tighten too much. Tightening too much could cause the blade to break within the barrel, making both your barrel and your blade useless. Once your barrel is tight, position the contacts at the opening of the barrel and firmly pull the string taut. Using a screwdriver, push the contact in from the top while simultaneously pulling it from the bottom. Pulling from the bottom will make sure that when you push the contact in, the wire doesn't get caught underneath it, but make sure you don't pull too tight, otherwise you disconnect the wire from the contact. After seating your contact, we need to glue your wires in. Before you start, put aside 2 pieces of masking tape. Pull the wires taut and make sure that they're as neat as possible, because flat wires makes it easier for gluing and decreases general wear and tear. As you're pulling the wire down the length of the blade, use the stick of a Q-tip to help you press down on the 2 wires. And once you get down to the bend in the blade, use the stick to press the wires in place and tape them down so that the string stays taut. Keep going down past the bend and then wrap the string around the flat part of the blade, taping that down too. Be careful when running your hands down the blade. Metal splinters are very real and very painful. We'll next use chains to bend the blade to hold it in place while we glue. Bending the blade helps you keep the string tight against the blade, and since the super glue will dry when the blade is bent, it will help prevent the glue from cracking as much. Hook both ends of the chain onto the blade and then tighten the chains incrementally using the links, making sure that the blade is being bent the right way. Ideally, you'll want to bend the blade so that there's about a hand's length of distance between the blade and the chain. Now on to gluing. Take a tube of super glue and the fuzzy end of a Q-tip. Start about ½ an inch down from the tip so as to avoid accidentally supergluing the barrel to the blade. The super glue is ready and you don't need a lot of it, so dot a little, spread the glue down, and repeat all the way down to the end of the blade. Stop before you get to the bend because you also want to avoid supergluing the Q-tip onto the blade. Go back and use the fuzzy end of the Q-tip to wipe away excess super glue. And be careful when gluing, we don't need any more Armories getting high off of super glue fumes. Here is an example of what a glued wire should look like. As you can see, just a thin layer of glue is sufficient. Once you have finished gluing, hang the weapon up to dry overnight. When the weapon itself is dried, you will also need to remove the Q-tip stick at the end of the blade and glue that wire down as well. Stop about ½ an inch from the end of the blade here too, because you will need space for the insulation. Now once your weapon is completely dried, you can put the rest of it together. The first step is insulation. They thread over the wire and you want to make sure that they're at a decent length so that they can connect to the prongs easily and that you have extra wire to work with if the weapon breaks or something happened to the weapon in the future. Next up is bell guard. The bell guard has little grooves to allow for breathing space for the wires. When putting on your bell guard, make sure that it's facing the right way. The fat side of the bell guard should match the handedness of the blade. So right-handed weapons means that there is more bell guard on the right-hand side, and vice versa for lefty weapons. The next step is fire. Use a lighter to burn the wires not covered by the insulation to expose them, so that they can be hooked onto the sockets later on. Like the bell guard, the sockets also have a groove for your wires, and they rely on handedness too. If the weapon is right-handed, the sockets go on the left side. Fit the socket in and then thread your wires through the rat hole of the socket, which will allow us to connect the wires to the socket prongs later when everything is stable. After the socket, put in the bell guard pad and then the grip, making sure that the grip has a washer inside of it. The grip also has a divot for the wires, so maneuver the pad so you can check to make sure that you're not on top of the wires. Once you're oriented correctly, screw it in with a hex nut. Now for the wires. Wrap the wires clockwise between the prong and the washer, and then slowly screw the prongs back on. When you are screwing it back in, if you feel any resistance, stop and unscrew immediately. Resistance means that your wire has gotten caught in the threading, and if you don't stop, you will break the wire. When you are done, don't cut the wire just yet. In case something goes wrong, you have room to fix it. Before we put the tip together, let's check our wires. Hook up your weapon to the box, making sure that the light is at resistance. The window at the top of the box indicates resistance, so right now it should be at infinite. Check to make sure that your wires are not touching the bell guard, and then use a screwdriver at the tip of the weapon to connect both the contacts together. The indicator should move towards low resistance, which means our wire is working. Now we can put our tip back together. An epee tip consists of a weight spring, a tip with a contact spring attached, and 2 epee tip screws. Our final step is testing. First, check to make sure your weapon works by depressing the tip. Then, check to make sure it passes both weights and shims. Once it does, trim off the end of the wires and you have a complete weapon. Congratulations!